Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of When Love Comes, the podcast. I'm your host, April Nowlin, and I am a certified relationship coach on this mission to help people to heal from heartbreak and prepare for healthy relationships. Now, listen, I say that because if you're like me or most people that I talk to, we were never really taught how to do relationships well. And so, one of the goals of this podcast is to share different whether it's relationship journeys, whether it is relationship advice, but share resources to help you guys and myself to do relationships better. So, my guest today, I'm excited about. I recently met her virtually, and one of the things that we talked about was kind of this whole thing around being feminine in relationships, right? And so, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of people having kind of this discussion about femininity and is it good? Is it bad? Like, what does that look like in relationships? And so she really talks a lot about how to turn off the boardroom and return to femininity, which I love, right? And it's something I can relate to. So I want to welcome to the show Natalie Poindexter.
Hello, hello, April. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I always start with this question. Where did you get your concept, your idea of relationships growing up?
Um, I was the youngest child of three, and I had a 10-year age gap and an 11-year age gap between my brother and sister and I. And so I was often off on my own, in my own imaginary world. And that is genuinely where I got my idea of relationships. But then I also would definitely say my grandparents. I spent a lot of time with my mom's mom, my oma, and they were a very old school couple, lived in separate rooms, had separate I mean, they were married, they had family, but they lived differently. And so I that was and then soap operas because I watched soap operas with my oma as the world turns
Yes.
taught me so much about relationships.
Mhm, mhm. Yes. Yes.
So that would be I think where I learned about relationships. But I always wanted to be friends with everyone.
Mm.
As a child, as I was growing up, I just wanted to like be around everyone. And so I didn't understand relationships genuinely, because I kind of lived in this other world as a kid. And I wanted that relationship to be what I saw in my imagination, which is not reality. So I sometimes am like, I was this quirky kid in a way who made up what I thought good relationships looked like, while I also had soap operas and my grandparents to show me what I thought a relationship should look like. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that you said that. Like you thought, because, what we see growing up really shapes our idea, our expectations of what relationships, and that's not just romantic relationships, but platonic relationships. Like how you were like, I wanted to be friends with everyone, right? Like I'm sure that shaped a lot of your relationships, whether it was high school or young adult too, right?
Oh, definitely. And in high school, I was a super jock, like big athlete. So all my friends were guys, and I didn't quite understand how to have a relationship with women because all of my teammates, I mean, they were just my teammates. I didn't see them as my friends. I saw them as my teammates. They were the people that I spent time with, that I built time with. Um, they were my folks I could rely on, but I don't even think I considered them necessarily friends because we spent so much time together. Um, and then in high school, I was just, again, kind of a nerd, uh, posing as a jock.
Yeah.
Um, and then finally got to college and was like, oh, I don't have to like everybody.
Mm.
Oh, okay. And they don't have to like me. Oh, okay. Well, I guess I can just do whatever I want then. And whatever happens, happens and it works.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to go back to your grandparents. So I spent
Mm.
I would say quite a bit of time with my grandparents on my dad's side as a young child, and they had separate bedrooms. Um, and what I saw, they still kind of had their roles, right? So, like, my grandfather did certain things, my grandmother still took care of certain things, but they had these separate bedrooms. And as a kid, it was normal for them, but when I became like a young adult, I was like, oh, that's weird. But now in my 40s, I'm like, I get it. Like, I understand having like your space and your routines and like,
Mhm.
and it doesn't lessen your relationship or lessen your love for the person. But when I say I totally get it now, I understand.
I always see these commercials where it's like, "Oh, do you have a partner who loves it hot and you love it cold?" And I'm like, separate rooms make sense.
Yes,
No, I see why I get it, and
I
I
get it.
feel that.
Yeah, I totally get it. So I want to dive into a little bit of your story. One of the reasons
Yeah.
why I have you on the show is because you've got this personal experience with what you have categorized as turning off the boardroom. So
Mhm.
share with us a little bit about where that comes from.
Okay, so I became an entrepreneur about 4 years ago, officially three. And I wasn't sure what I wanted in a relationship. Um, because I was this independent woman who was doing all of these things, and I was leading conversations, and I was this executive who had a team. I was all of these things that was very masculine energy, not me presenting, but I was just in this very dominant, in charge, take control. I have all of the answers role. And I finally got to a point, my last birthday in July, where I looked at one of my homegirls and I was like, I'm ready for my partner. And I had never said that before because I had always thought whoever I'm with better be all right with who I am.
Yeah.
And he better be okay with exactly how powerful I am and how I own this business and how I show up. And if he's not okay with that, that's his problem.
Yeah.
And what I realized in that thought process was that can't be a partnership because it sounds like he's just another one of my employees at that point. Um, and I decided very boldly to be like, I want to become myself. And I had spent the past year and a half really spending time on who am I in all of my being? Like, who am I? And it was just like, Natalie, you are this divine feminine woman who is posing as this executive, is posing and not in a negative way, but just that was a mask I had to learn to wear in order to be in that role. It wasn't who I actually am. And once I was able to understand that and say it wasn't Natalie, that wasn't me at my core, um, my soft, I feel like I'm saying trendy words, but like my soft girl era started to come out where I'm like, oh, I don't do that. I don't. You want me to do what? And I'm 5'11". Like I'm a big woman. You know what I mean? Like I've got muscles. I can do it. But I'm like, you want me to lift boxes? Oh, I can't do that. I don't know. You want to be stressed out about something? I can't handle that either. I don't do that. And I finally got to a space where I felt like I was ready to be with a person who was ready to amplify that part of me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. I want us to kind of take a step back in the journey. You and I both have been in executive positions. We've been in positions of
Mhm.
leadership. And I feel like that is one of the things that contributes to women, and particularly women of color, kind of stepping into this more masculine role in life, right? Now, I do think that we each have a masculine part of us and a feminine part of us, but I do believe that being in corporate America can really shape how we show up in our relationships and in our homes, right? So I have been, in many cases, the only woman in spaces, as well as the only chocolate chip in the cookie, I like to say, right? So it's almost like you have to become this person that is required to show up in these environments. And I think that um, we're not really taught how to almost turn that off at home, right? And becoming, whether it's an executive or in leadership or things like that, I think begins to shape so much of our identity, which then shapes our personality. And it's almost like I have to be this masculine version of myself to survive.
Mhm. Oh, it took me, I left corporate in 21, and it took me probably 2 years to shed the corporate trauma that I had gone through because and I think this is every, most often, woman of color story. We are the only one, and we are expected to operate at a very specific level um, to maintain the status quo. I'm using that in very soft quotes, right? Like, but I feel like if you get it, you get it. If you know, you know, you know where I'm saying with this. And it's this mindset of, well, we can't show up and be the angry black woman. And we also can't show up and be too much of a know-it-all. Because if we know everything, then they're going to get intimidated. And if they get intimidated, then it's going to get toxic. And if it gets toxic, now I'm exhausted. And so we have to mask in every level of where we are in corporate, but we carry it so heavily when we come home. And then think of COVID, where home was the workplace. And so now you're just carrying it all day, every day. Um, and I realized, I hope I can jump into this. I met this man,
Mhm.
and I
Not
realized when
man,
I met
girl.
him, I realized when I met him, that was it. There was no more after five. We're done. I am not the CEO, and I could take phone calls all day, every day, but I am not running the relationship, the household, the process, his life, my life. And what I learned from that as well is I wasn't trying to be the proverbial savior in every way, shape, and form because I felt, in corporate, I feel like I have to save myself all the time.
Yeah.
You got to save your anger, your frustrations, your sadness, your excitement. And now I'm like, oh, is that what this means when I get to turn off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll take that.
Yeah, you said something powerful, and I just want to emphasize this as we continue the conversation.
Please.
That meeting this particular man, I would say, gave you the freedom um to, like you said, turn on a different side of you. But I want to say this to the listeners. Um, we're gonna help you turn it on before you meet. Right? So it's not just meeting the right person, but you're absolutely right. I dated a guy a few years ago, and I have been, and we'll talk about kind of why this is, but I've kind of been the person in my relationship that was, the hands on, the get it done, for lack of a better word, the dominant one, for different reasons. And I remember he was working on something, and I kept saying, well, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do?
Mm.
He says, well, I just need you to sit there and look pretty. And when I say I was so offended by, by that statement, and I mean offended. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like,
How dare
April,
you?
right.
How
Like,
dare
how
you?
dare you? And I had to ask myself, like, why was I so offended by that statement?
Mm-hmm.
And it is because I had been in so many previous relationships where I was expected, required to do certain things, that became my norm. And it was being with him that really shifted my mentality on, like, what does being feminine look like? Like, it's okay to just sit there and look pretty and let him take care of things. But I think a part of, and I want to dive into kind of how some of us got here, right?
Mhm.
Um, Many times, I think when we see a woman who is kind of leaning more into her masculine side, I don't think it's always we've made that choice, right? I know for me, a lot of the men that I chose in my young adult life and in my adult
Mm.
life, I realized were irresponsible.
Mhm.
And so it was almost like in order for me to be with you, I got to take over.
Yeah.
And I think that that is whether it is what we've seen in the last, let's say 20, 30 years with, people becoming single parents. And I think part of it is the ability we have to be in corporate America that may not have been there 50, 60 years ago, right?
Mhm.
But from your experience, your perspective, like what do you think kind of adds to us walking more in that masculine energy than our feminine?
Oh, it's conditioning. I think that it's unintentional familial conditioning from our mothers, our sisters, our aunts, um, because they weren't given that space to really be in their feminine all the time, even though they played the very traditional feminine role.
Yeah.
Because, and when I think of femininity, I think it's expression. I think that it's loud, that it's messy. It's a little bit of everything all the time because we and I say this intentionally, like we are creators.
Mhm.
We are literal creators. So we have to have all of these different skills, abilities, things of that sort. But we're always told, like, don't be too prideful. Don't be too humble. So we have to stay in our place in a way while also showing up in a very male dominated world. And I think one of the only ways that we know how to do that is to mirror what we've seen that's acceptable. Because when you look at the successful Black women who are the CEOs, there's this concept of like they demand, respect in the boardroom. When they walk in, they're feared. I think of Devil Wears Prada because I love clothes, you know,
Yeah.
terrified of her.
Yeah.
But she stepped in her true femininity in that space because she was certain of what she was creating and she knew how she wanted it to look. But it was, oh, she's for lack of better words, the B word, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that made, well, but you have to be that in order to be successful. You have to be that in order to be powerful. You have to be that in order to make it in corporate. It has to be a dog eat dog world because you can't help anybody. You can't nurture anybody. You can't help anybody because they could stab you in the back. Don't forget that, right? And it's this societal conscious of if you help someone, they could hurt you. And who doesn't help too often? Men. No shade, but I'm just saying they help, they're a little less nurturing in their experiences in life, right?
Yeah.
And so we're just told, don't be so nurturing. Don't be so caring because you could get hurt that way. You won't make it that way. You won't be successful that way. And then once your mom has heard that, well, then she tells you that. And then you tell your kids that. And then it's just this passed down consciousness that this has to be the way we have to do it. And I'm so excited. I hate to see it, but I'm so excited to see the women leaving corporate
Mhm.
because I feel like we're all like, that don't work.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. When I listen to you talk, the word that comes to mind is survival, right?
Mm,
I think about just my own personal experience and the examples of the women that I had in my life growing up. And there was really kind of
mhm,
these two groups of women. There was this group that I saw sometimes being abused by men
mm,
in various forms, whether that was physical, emotional. And I saw them just kind of cower under that. And then I also had this other group of women that I saw that were very dominant. Um, I would not consider soft at all, right? But I remember growing up and thinking to myself, which one of these do I want to be? And I chose that dominant, right? But I didn't see a middle. There was no middle. There wasn't the mom that was like strong and soft. It was like you're kind of one or the other.
Is it?
And
Yep.
I made this choice at a young age that I was going to be the dominant to survive because I wasn't going to allow men to treat me, quote unquote, that way, right? The way that I saw some of those other relationships. So I don't know if you can relate to that as well, but seeing different examples growing up and relating that to this is the type of woman that I'm supposed to be in order to survive.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I feel like I've spent most of my life in survival mode. Most of what I've navigated and learned to become was to survive. Um, and I've had very male dominated careers. I spent some time as an EMT. And so you want to talk about being the only chocolate chip in the cookie. I mean, you want to talk, I was the only chip to be, there wasn't no cookie per se to sit in. And I mimicked, I mean, we're taught as kids, especially as little people, we're sponges. And so we just become whatever we see. And I don't think I learned until I was in, I haven't aged a day over 25, but when I was in my 30s,
Right.
that I was in survival mode. I didn't know I was in survival mode until I started to hear how people were talking. And I very vividly remember talking to someone and I was like, "Oh, how are you doing?" She's like, "Oh, I'm thriving." And I was like, "Wow, thriving? That's beautiful." But I had no clue how she got to the thriving. Um, because what I saw growing up was I had two role models who I knew I did not want to be anything like. And no shame to them, they just needed to heal a whole lot. And I realized that that's where survival mode thrives, is in the hard part of healing. And I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but
Wow.
I do, like, I realized I needed to heal a lot of my mindset, my pain, my conditioning. Um, and you could maybe call that parenting, right? You could maybe call that truly parenting. Um, but I was like, that can't work for me. It might have worked for y'all, and that is beautiful. But if I'm gonna make it through the rest of my life, I can't do it this way because I'm tired.
Yes.
I shouldn't be this tired.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think we get to this space, and I don't know if it's age or whatever, but I felt like that. So going through my third divorce, 7 or 8 years ago, one of the things that I had to ask myself was, why do I keep showing up in this type of relationship, right? Like, who
Mm,
is showing up? Because what I realized was all three of my ex-husbands were the same person, like different
mm,
name, different face, but same characteristics. And I had to ask myself, why did I keep choosing this particular man? And I think a big part of what it stemmed from, right? Childhood, how I was raised, but making that choice to be a certain type of woman meant that I was making a choice to attract a certain type of man. And what I realized was, for so long, I felt comfortable in the dysfunctional relationship because I knew that I
mm,
had the strength to manage those things. So I would meet men and attract men and be with men who were emotionally unwell, who were financially unstable, right? Because I felt so conditioned that it was my job to take care of, it was my job to fix. And I remember thinking to myself during that healing season was like, I'm tired. Like I'm physically tired of being the man, if that makes sense. I'm tired of fixing the toilet. I'm tired of paying the bills. Like I'm
Mm,
tired. And I think we have to get to that place if we're a woman that's struggling in survivor mode to ask ourselves like when is enough enough?
mm. Girl, you said a whole word. A whole word. As someone who has said no to a couple of proposals, I didn't know why I said no, but I knew I was supposed to say no. And I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, and I was just like, I just keep attracting these ain't worth nothing men. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm wonderful. I'm fabulous. I don't know why I keep attracting them. And they're like, well, what are you expecting from them? Because whatever expectation, level of expectations you have for them, they know that that's it. They don't have to meet any true level of expectation because the bar is so low. You've set the bar to nothing. So they don't have to show up for you. They don't have to be anything for you. They don't have to try for you because you will do everything. And that's probably why you're so tired. And I was like, you know what? Now that you mention it, when you put it that way, and I laugh because I used to when I was at EMT, I did a lot of training, and I boxed,
Mm,
and I used to carry my gloves in my back seat all the time. I had I don't know why. I don't. There was no real reason that I did that. But in my mind, as you said, it made you strong. It made you powerful. It made you, you knew you had the strength to handle it. You were resilient in your ability to care for these grown children. And my friend who's been married for quite some time, he was like, Natalie, you keep carrying boxing gloves in the back of your car, and that's what you're going to attract fighters. And I was like, my dark side was like, do I need an army?
right.
Could I use an army? And then I was like, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to train an army. I don't need that. And I had to think even to this day, I said something to my person and he was like, ma'am, you're not the man in this relationship. And I don't need you to be.
Come on.
So if you want to pay for dinner, great, sure, whatever. You can pay for dinner if you want to. But I'm not asking you to do that. And I remember the first time I was like, do you want me to get this? And he was like, if you want to, I mean, sure. I like to be treated to dinner. And I was just like, is that what I've been doing?
Hmm.
Have I been the boyfriend in the relationships? Because I feel like I've been treating to dinner. I've been treating folks to dinner for a real long time.
Yeah.
And they had no problem with it.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to be, I wanted to. And so now, even even in this space, and I think as I say this, I genuinely mean it. And especially for those women who are listening who are like, I'm ready for that quote unquote soft girl era, and I don't want it to just be for the gram. You have to be okay letting that go and being reminded that you are not the man in the relationship.
Yes.
And that is hard to release, not because you can't, but because you know it so well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I am, I think we're all in this space of learning, of transformation, every way, business, relationships, love, life, faith, all of that. Um, but I feel like the more we talk about how we let it go, how we left that version of ourselves and we were reminded, I don't fix toilets.
Look, look, look,
I
look, girl, look,
don't. Not
look,
anymore. I don't.
look.
Can I? Yes. Will I? No.
Right, right. And so I want to talk about like the evolution, right? Like the evolution of, and you said this, I've seen this. I'm going to be honest, I kind of have a little, feeling when I hear people say stuff like soft girl era, right? Why can't we
Mm.
just have like a soft girl life? Because when I think about era, that means at some point this is going to end. Why can't we just choose like to be soft women? And when I say the word soft women, and I feel the need to say
Mhm.
this because even as I say it, sometimes it invokes a little, a little something inside of me because I think we've been taught that when you are soft as a woman, when you are caring, when you're nurturing, that there's something wrong with that. It's almost equated to being weak, right?
Mhm.
Um, I have been in ministry in some capacity for over, 30 years, and I've worked on staff at two different churches. And as much as the organizations that I was a part of, we women preached and women did all the things, it was still very much this a boys club. Ministry is still very much a boys club, right? Behind the scenes. And I remember having a talk with a coworker, this was a couple years ago, about, I guess, different roles, whether it was
Mm.
in the church, within the home. And it was almost like if you were the kind, soft woman, you were almost seen as like you're weak, right? You're the weak
Mhm.
woman. So I want to talk about now you've kind of decided in your head, we got to decide first that I want to shift, the energy that I'm putting out. I want to shift the role that I play. You meet this person. What did it look like practically as you're making that shift?
Oh man. I had to learn how to communicate differently. And let me also say, both of my parents are pastors. So I grew up in the church and I get it, right? Because it is, yeah, bless Joel, but you know what I'm saying? Like if we go down the layers, right? It's like Joel, TD, Fred. It's always these men who are leading the congregation. Um, and so I feel you 1,050% on that. I remember meeting him for the first time, and we met each other online because he doesn't live in Austin. And I remember meeting him for the first time, and my plane got in 20 minutes early, and he was like, "I'm picking you up from the airport." And I was like, "Okay," so I sent him a text message like, "Hey, I landed early," and he's like, "Okay, I'm still gonna be on time, but you're gonna have to wait for me for 15 minutes." And I had this guttural reaction of being like, I'm not waiting on him. I'll order my own Uber and I will get to where I need to get to because I'm not waiting on any man and how dare he make me wait and and I went on this 9:30 in the morning. There was no reason I was that fussy at 9:30 in
Mm,
the morning on a vacation, on having fun. And I was like, well, don't worry about it. I'll just get my own. Because I also had this triggering moment of, well, if I'm too much, he won't like me anymore. And if I'm too needy, he won't like me anymore. And if I ask for too much help because that's weak, he's just going to leave me at the airport anyways. And he didn't answer me. He didn't answer my text when I said, I'm just going to order an Uber. And something told me in my spirit was just like, Natalie, stop it. Sit still and just wait. I've been telling you to sit still. Sit down, sit still, girl. And so I do. And I put my headphones in and I'm listening to some music. And he pulls up and we get in the car and I was like we get, we say our hellos and all of those things. And I'm like, why didn't you answer my text message? And he was like, because I wasn't giving you any attention for that. Because I told you I was coming to pick you up from the airport. Girl, I had to drop my kids off at school. And I was like, oh,
mm.
good to be a parent. Good to be a
You
whole
had to be
dad.
responsible.
That's real tacky. All right. I mean, that was really ridiculous what I just did, but I had to have that like he's like, I'm not giving you that attention because I never said I couldn't pick you up. I never said you were a problem. I never said it was too much. I never said I wouldn't be there. What you want to eat? Are you hungry? You need to eat some food? And I was like, actually, yes. Now that you mention it, I'm quite hungry. And it was so quick though
Yeah.
that I went back to he's just like everybody else. He's just like all the
Yeah.
rest of them. I can't count on him. I can't rely on him. I got to be this strong, independent woman on my own. And I laugh at myself when I won't say he checks me because that's not what it is, but he quietly reminds me if you need to cry, cry. You should emote. You should let that out. Don't you holding on to it and being tough for who? Who are you being tough for? It's just us right now. And I think I said this to you when we were chatting before. He created such a safe space that I I finally felt like I could let that while I'm in charge. Because I have to be. Well, I can do this because I have to. I can carry this bag because I don't have anybody else to. He finally created this container for me to be feminine and then not feel um, bad for asking for help, not
Yeah.
feel less than for asking for help. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what you said was just really hit home as far as like those triggers, right? When we
Mhm.
have been walking um in a role, in a masculine role for so long, the slightest thing will trigger us into thinking, I have to go back to doing it myself. And that's
Mhm.
whether I've been a single parent most of my daughter's life, so I get it, right? When you're used to doing, I've been in corporate where you've kind of rely on yourself. So I get where it comes from. But you're right. I think one of the first things that we have to do is be able to manage the triggers. And I know for me, making that shift, I would have to pause. I believe in something called the power of the pause, right?
Mhm.
Meaning when we're triggered, to pause and ask ourselves a few questions. One of those questions being, is this really what's happening? Right? Is he
Mhm.
really not being dependable? Is he really, right? Like, no. Or is it this perceived action that we are so used to and conditioning to responding to that instead of us taking a moment and saying, okay, what is this person proven? Right? Can I trust him? Is this a safe space? To like, oh, I've seen this before. He's going to be late. I'm just going to, take over. But
Yep.
taking that moment to pause and assess what's actually happening, and then asking ourselves, why do I feel this way? Once again, did this person actually prove to be untrustworthy? Or is it that old, thought in the back of my mind that I just got to do it all myself? I got to take care of everything. And so I had to walk through that in that last relationship where I feel like was really shifting me to be more feminine. And it was when something triggered me, okay, why am I feeling this way? And when I went back to look at the receipts of what he had done in that role, I was like, okay, it's not him. It's me. It's me.
Sometimes that self-reflection can be very clarifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's self reflection. I think another big thing is choosing wisely, right? I
Mm.
realized that in the relationships where I felt like I had to be the man or, do all the
Mhm.
things, it was because I was choosing people that weren't responsible, right? They weren't
Yeah.
responsible for money. Some of them, like when I met them, were like, I'm barely paying my rent. They just weren't responsible people. And so what I realized was that when I started to date a different type of man, a lot of
Mhm.
that went out the window. because I'm not worried about you not paying bills. I'm not worried about you, losing a job over something stupid. Like, it changes our perspective on who we want to even be with.
I One of my friends told me maybe you should go after someone who's not your type.
Mm.
And I was like, but my type is exactly what I like. And she was like, that might be the problem. That might be the problem, Natalie, because if that's what you're attracting and if that's what you like, then that's what you're gonna get over and over. And I had to look back and I'm like, how how did I keep getting the same? And because I genuinely, and I will say, I thought it was me. And it was me, but I thought it was, I put this onus on myself of something was wrong with me. And that's why I was attracting this type of man. And it wasn't that there was anything wrong with me or that I had done. Um, it was that was the space that I was in.
Yeah.
And that was the space I allowed myself to be in. And when I learned that's not I've really, I had someone say, a lot of my friends were like giving me relationship advice, and they're like, you're going to have to find somebody that's this. You're going to have to find somebody that's this. And you're going to have to find somebody that's this. And I'm like, well, crazy thing. He doesn't hit any of those characteristics or parameters that you all decided of what I needed. Um, I had to look internally and say, who do I need as my partner? Because that's who I need to attract. But until I got to the point where I was comfortable saying that, I had to learn to say, I'm picking me first, and I'm saying yes to what feels good to me.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying, and I make a joke because I'm like, he's not the typical guy I would have said yes to.
Yeah.
But also, he's the guy that would come up and talk to me. Because I've been told, oh, you're intimidating in person.
Mhm.
Oh, you have a lot of energy. Oh, you dress very fancy. Maybe that's why men don't approach you. And I was like, well, I can't be less than who I am. So what do I do now? And I think of it from that perspective of like, I think if we had been out together somewhere, he would have walked up and spoke to me. He would have said something to me because I don't intimidate him. I'm not too much for him, I am very flamboyant and he is not. And that's okay because I thought I needed that mirror. And when I look back, I'm like, all of the men were just like me.
Mm.
They wanted the spotlight. They wanted to be told they were pretty. They wanted to be at the forefront of every experience, what they need, right? And it was always that. And I'm like, I thought that's what I wanted. But I think I need someone who's maybe the exact opposite of me.
Yeah.
I haven't tried that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something to be said about patterns, right? And
Mm,
like you said, choosing the same thing. And I think that's some of the best advice. I've gotten that advice currently in my single season is, dating people that you wouldn't normally expect, right? Or you wouldn't
mm,
normally, because we get in our mind this type, but when that type constantly causes you to be in a space that is unhealthy, you have to stop and ask yourself, like, okay, maybe I should try something different. And I've had so many guests on this podcast who have shared their love story where they ended up with someone completely different than what they thought, or that was on the list. And so sometimes, y'all, we just need something a little bit different in life, to live a different life. And so I totally agree with that. Before we close, I want to touch on just some practical things that women can do to just, embrace their femininity, maybe shift it in some capacity. And one of the things that I'll share is I was listening to a clip that someone sent me, don't know who it was, but I thought it was such great advice for women who might be struggling a little, where maybe you're in corporate, you're in a leadership role at work, and you just don't know how to turn it off when you get home. And one of the things that he said was, our attitudes are like wearing certain clothing, right? Like you
Mhm.
would wear a swimming suit in the snow, you wouldn't wear a fur coat in the desert, right? And so when we think about making that shift, is that yes, at work, you might have to be like the power woman, in the corner office, and that is what it takes for you at work, and that serves you there. You might have the suit on, right? But when you come home, then you might have to take that suit off and put on the comfy pajamas and be the soft place to land for whether it's your partner or your children or things like that. And so I felt like that was such good advice as we think about who we are in different situations, is literally like that persona, that attitude is like, what are you wearing right now? Right? Is
Mhm.
what you're wearing appropriate for the situation? So I wouldn't wear my comfy pajamas to the office because that ain't right. But I can take off that suit, when I get home and get comfortable.
Yeah, I love that. Because if you sat in your suit all day, you'd be very frustrated and uncomfortable,
Mhm.
very uncomfortable. Um, I think a practical tip I would say is um, question yourself when you start to get into that cycle of norm of, is this the cycle I want to repeat? Because we can wash, rinse, and repeat every day, but eventually that black t-shirt will fade. And sometimes it's time to get a new t-shirt. Uh, and that I feel like that's what I'm using as a tool to support myself in. And then also, you had mentioned it before, like taking that pause when we are triggered, because we know our triggers more than we say out loud. Um, and so when we feel that trigger, is it the time to have an emotional response? Is it the time to reflect? Is it right? And just taking that second, taking that breath before you hit that send on that text message, rereading, and then actually listening to what was said and not what you heard. Because oftentimes what we read or what we hear, we we make it into something else. And so taking that intentional pause, but also deciding if you want to cut that cycle that you're on.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
it. Cutting the cycle. And I think that is kind of the foundation for all of us, right? So anyone who is, any woman that's struggling with really finding your femininity, and for a lot of us, we don't even know what that looks like, which is where that self discovery comes in. But I think you're absolutely right. A big key to shifting into that, whether it's soft girl era or soft girl life, is really looking at our cycles and asking ourselves, how do I break this cycle? And not just for us, for our children, for our future generations. How can we in 2026 be different examples for the women, the young ladies in our life?
Yeah.
So, Natalie, I want to say thank you again for being on the podcast, for lending your voice, for your transparency and sharing your story. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me. I hope this was helpful to your listeners.
Yes, I'm sure it will be. And then lastly, where can people connect with you if they're like, hey, I enjoy listening to you, want to follow you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and on LinkedIn under Natalie Poindexter. And I just recently rejoined TikTok under the Natalie Poindexter. So please connect, stay in touch.
Yes, connect with Natalie. So, y'all, thank you so much for listening to another episode of When Love Comes, the podcast. I only have one ask. If you have enjoyed what you heard, share it with someone. We never know who needs to hear the different topics, which is why I have different voices sharing different stories, just because I know it'll resonate with someone. If you have not listened to season 1 and 2, because we are now in season 3, which feels crazy, go back, listen to season 1, listen to season 2, so that you and I are ready when love comes.